Look, if you're struggling to finish verbal reasoning and stuck around the 27 out of 44 range, let me show you the 3V reading method that finally fixes your reading speed without sacrificing your accuracy. My name is Farhan, I'm a junior doctor and I've helped over 100 students get into medicine and dentistry across Australia. And today, you're going to learn how to read verbal reasoning passages faster and more accurately using the following skills: avoiding backskipping, controlling your subvocalization, and visualization. Now, just a couple of points on developing reading speed. Why do you need this to begin with? Look, verbal reasoning is the most time-precious section in the entire UCAT. So, the seconds that you save per passage, per question, become vital. Look, if we do the maths, even just 2 seconds per question becomes 88 seconds by the end of the whole section. Look, how many times have you finished verbal reasoning and just wished for an extra minute or two? This is exactly how you end up getting that time back. Now, reading is challenging. It's not the easiest thing for us, and I think there's a couple of reasons as to why. Number one is because all our brains are cooked. It's fried. Nowadays, almost all mediums of consumption are passive. Think TV, video games, music, even audiobooks. You don't actually have to physically read anything. And the second reason is, even if people were to sit down and read, most people are usually quite slow at it. Reading efficiency is something I define as both your reading speed and your reading comprehension. And any gap in this equation will make reading a laborious task for you. For example, if your reading speed is suffering, sure, you might be able to understand everything that you read, but it's going to take you time. You might get bored after a while. Whereas if your reading comprehension is suffering, sure, you might be a whiz, but what did you actually retain? What did you understand? So reading efficiency means being quick at it, but not sacrificing your accuracy as you go. Now, I think there are 3 overarching pillars to keep in mind when it comes to developing your reading speed. Number 1 is consistency. So reading is a skill, and like any other skill in life, it needs consistent practice to be able to improve. So what I want you to do is make improving your reading speed a habit. I want you to set aside 3 to 10 minutes each day and dedicate it towards improving your reading speed. Now, I know this isn't any new groundbreaking advice. You've probably heard it before, but you're also probably not doing it. And that's the difference between where you are right now and where you can be when it comes to your verbal reasoning. Second is enjoyment. Look, for a lot of us, reading isn't exactly the most fun activity in the world. And so what we need to do is try and find a way to make it more enjoyable. And the way you do that is actually just read something you genuinely enjoy. Read about a topic or a field that you're interested in improving in. And there's books on pretty much anything that you can think about. Anything, right? So I'm into soccer, and if I really wanted to get back into the groove of reading again, I'd read some sort of a biography about a manager or a player just to get some enjoyment out of reading. And lastly is purpose. Remember at the back of your mind why you're doing all of this. It does help to keep that big picture in mind. Any improvement that you make from today until your UCAT is working towards that dream. Now, as a slight observation, every single 800 plus verbal reasoning scorer I've seen were avid readers as a kid. Now, I'll just put this out there. I scored a 600 on verbal reasoning. I didn't do all that well at all, and I didn't read books as a kid. Now, I was so frustrated with my 600 that I actually paid a colleague of mine to teach me everything he knew about verbal reasoning. He scored an 870, by the way. And what I found as a pattern through meeting plenty of people that have scored 800 in medicine is that they all read books as a kid. Like, the first question I asked them is, did you read books as a kid? And without fail, every single one of them said yes. Now, I don't want you to hear that and think, oh, I didn't read books as a kid, I'm never going to do well in verbal reasoning. What I want you to do is see the connection between reading more and doing well in verbal reasoning, and take that as your sign to begin reading more. There's absolutely improvement that you can make in this space of developing your reading speed and your reading comprehension. So the way to do that is just to read more. It's the unsexy answer. It's not what people want to hear, but it is the truth. But if we're looking for some tactics to help us develop our reading speed without sacrificing accuracy, I've got the 3V reading model. Remember, our goal here is to understand the passage faster, and this has 2 components: understand and faster. So the number one trap you can really fall into is trying to get so quick at reading the passage that you sacrifice your actual retention and understanding of what the passage is telling you. Here's the 3 V's: vigilance, vocalization, and visualization. Vigilance is all about staying locked in and not backskipping. I'll explain what that is when we go into it. Vocalization is increasing the pace of the inner voice that reads the text on the screen, or eliminating it altogether. And visualization is turning sentences into images as you read along. So let's go into it. Number 1 is vigilance, to stay locked in and not backskip. This is all about avoiding regression, which is essentially rereading the same line over and over again. Have you ever been reading something and you get a couple of sentences in and you realize you actually haven't understood any of what you've said? And so you go back to the top and you start again. This is what regression is. So there's a couple of reasons this happens. It's because 1, you're not actually paying attention to what you're reading, or 2, you have this slight anxiety that you didn't quite comprehend 100% of everything that you just read, and that compels you to go back and start reading again. So the reality is that it usually hampers comprehension. It disrupts your train of thought, and you disrupt the overall reading process and slow yourself down doing this. So the way you remedy this is you train yourself not to zone out as you read. You got to stay locked in. You got to stop just going through the motions of scanning your eyes through the passage and actually try and understand what's there. It sounds really simple, but I can't tell you how many times I would just go through the motions of reading without actually understanding anything. And resist the temptation to go back and reread, even if you feel like you don't understand all of it. Because at the end of the day, the whole concept of verbal reasoning is that you need to be able to answer questions without understanding every single word of the entire passage. So resist that temptation when you can. So that was vigilance. By the way, if you want more frameworks for every single UCAT question type in a singular cheat sheet, just click the first link in the description below. So let's move on to step 2, which is vocalization. So what I want you to do, I'm going to move my head out of the way, is read this passage quickly. So pause the video and read. So subvocalization is the fancy word for that inner voice that you just heard when reading that out loud. And it's potentially limiting your reading speed. At the end of the day, your inner voice speaks as fast as you usually speak. So that in and of itself can be that limiting factor. So the way that you can remedy this altogether, the experts in this field recommend to remove it, to almost just gloss your eyes over the words and understand them without that inner voice. Now, I found that really difficult to do. So the other way that I tried to remedy that is actually just increasing the talking speed in your brain. It's almost like if you can imagine having a really big sugar rush or a caffeine rush and how you'd be speaking as if you were in that mindset, and then using that to read so that you're increasing your talking speed, which really is a proxy for your reading speed. And the last one is visualization, or turning sentences into images. So why is this useful? Look, at the end of the day, most of your comprehension that happens on the fly is due to your ability to conjure images. So as opposed to just reading the raw words themselves, your mind is always visualizing what is going on. I want you to think about a small blue car and then try to describe it in as much detail as possible in your head. Chances are what happened is you didn't think about the words in and of themselves, like BLUESMALL. You saw an image like this in your head, and then you started describing the car through that particular image that you saw in your head. So the real juice of this is that you have to immerse yourself in the passage's world. By the way, this is part of the reason why when there are topics that you quite enjoy reading about in verbal reasoning, you tend to find those easier because you can visualize them easier. So, for example, if we had a passage like this, here's what I'm thinking. So this guy won a Nobel Prize. I'm thinking this person accepting a paper or a prize demonstrated that exposing bacteria to insufficient concentrations of penicillin develops resistance. I'm thinking of a petri dish and some bacteria and more prescription papers. Agricultural practices means that it was administered to livestock rather than humans. I'm thinking of some Livestock. All right. So think about the visual impact of what you're reading, and it helps you retain more of what you read so that you don't fall into that trap of going through the entire passage, looking at the question and realizing, oh my God, I've just forgotten everything that I've just read. Visualization is what helps with that. So here are some of the traps that most students fall into. Number one is rereading the same sentence 3 times just to be safe and burning 15 to 20 seconds just like that. Number 2 is letting your inner voice read every word at normal speaking speed. In reality, that could be the thing that's limiting you. And number 3 is zoning out halfway through the passages and just going through the motions, which forces you to have to reread the passage. So here's your do's and don'ts. Do spend 3 to 10 minutes daily reading something you genuinely enjoy. Do notice and resist the urge to backskip unless the question needs it. Do practice visualizing passages instead of just hearing the words via your inner voice. And do increase the pace of that inner voice, or if you can, eliminate it entirely. Don't aim for perfect comprehension of every line before looking at options. You're not meant to. Don't silently speak every single word at your normal talking speed. And don't increase speed at the cost of comprehension, which is probably the most common trap that people fall into. So, here's your next steps. Number 1 is practice reading quicker. Now, I'd recommend doing this online because at the end of the day, your UCAT's going to be online as well, just to make it more realistic and lifelike. So there's online articles, you might have PDF versions of books, or if you really want simulation style, then just do more and more practice questions and get quicker at reading those passages. And if you don't already have a question platform to do these questions on, then you can use the code Farhan for 10% of med entry. And another thing that you can do is for the next 7 days, I want you to make a habit of just spending 3 to 10 minutes developing a speed reading habit. So every single day for 7 days, just something that you enjoy. So there are your next steps. Good luck, and I hope this improves your reading speed.